The NBA Finals Game 1 is tonight, and I am definitely looking forward to this. As I said earlier, to me, if you love basketball, if you love sports, there's just way too many great storylines with this NBA Finals. And joining us to talk more about it is Bryan Toporek, the NBA podcast co-host, also writes over there at Forbes Sports. Bryan, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, Josh. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good, Bryan. And listen, we can't zero in on just one storyline. There's so many storylines with this NBA Finals. You know, from Monty Williams and his personal journey to Budenholzer. Will he, is he going to exercise the demons? Chris Paul gets there at 36 years old. Giannis stayed in Milwaukee, got them there, kind of thing. There's so much going on here, but I want to ask you, which of the storylines is your favorite?
Yeah, I think going into the series, my biggest question is just the status of Giannis Antetokounmpo, because he was listed as doubtful yesterday. He's now been upgraded to questionable today. So obviously, if you get the two-time MVP back into the lineup, that's probably going to determine how successful the Bucks are in this series. But in terms of like the legacy talk, I think I'm not as concerned with Giannis, given all of the individual accolades and how young he is. I think just from a overall narrative perspective, Chris Paul getting his first shot at a ring, and probably it's going to be his best shot at a ring. He's already 36, and not to say that the Suns don't deserve to be here. They absolutely do. They're a great team, but things broke favorably for them, as it does most title teams. Who's to say that will happen next year? So for his sake and for the sake of, at least one process Sixer, I'd like to see the Suns come out as champions here.
It does have a feel also, what do you think of this, Bryan? That is almost like, remember when Dirk and Jason Kidd got to the NBA Finals 10 years ago? It was almost like, this is their last shot. They're ever going to get back here again. Then all of a sudden, there's a random dude like J.J. Barea shows up and takes over the NBA Finals. That could be Cameron Payne this year.
Easily.
I could totally see the Suns turning this into rallying for the veteran player kind of situation.
Yeah. Well, Cam Payne, too, has been, A, just really good throughout the playoffs, and B, I just trust the Suns' depth more than I do Milwaukee's, especially if Giannis is out. Dante DiVincenzo is another guy who's been out for most, if not all, the playoffs, and he doesn't come up because we've had so many, marquee players go down. But he's a quietly important player. He's akin to Danny Green in that regard, where, no one's bringing up that Danny Green got hurt in the Atlanta series, but, it wasn't a coincidence that the Sixers looked a lot better pre-Danny Green injury than post. So, not having Dante, we don't know about Giannis. All of a sudden, Milwaukee's depth, I trust Pat Connaughton off of their bench, and presumably Bobby Portis will start until Giannis returns. But after that, do you trust Jeff Teague? Do you trust Bryn Forbes if he's not hitting shots? Drew Holiday is going to have to play such an enormous number of minutes in this series. And that's where, if Cam Payne gets matched up against Jeff Teague for even 10 to 12 minutes in this game, he's going to have a field day. And that, it's not going to be the number one storyline, but if he scores 8 or 10 quick points against Jeff Teague before Budenholzer realizes, I got to get Drew back in the game, they add up over time.
By the way, I'm only bringing this up for just a chuckle, not to make fun of this person, but okay. I will bring it up on the screen so you can see it as well, Bryan.
Okay.
There's someone who doesn't know that Dante DiVincenzo is injured.
Oh, no. He is indeed injured. In fact,
yes,
yeah.
Yes, he is injured, but don't tell that to Jay Wright. Jay Wright literally tweeted this at 6:17 p.m. today. Fired up for Mikal Bridges and Dante DiVincenzo to be in the NBA Finals.
Technically, they are both in the NBA Finals.
They are technically in the building. Yes.
Yes, correct. Right. So, kudos, coach.
I could not bring it up. I'm looking for Giannis news, and I see Jay Wright's tweet. Oh man, someone in the PR department did not do their job today. Oh my goodness! All right, back to the NBA Finals specifically. Bryan Toporek joining us here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN at Beat Toporek on Twitter. The NBA podcast is updated almost every other day, basically, as you guys have been going along. So, which makes Mort happy because he has something else to talk about aside from the Denmark soccer team over in the Euro.
Oh my God. I'm so excited for that to be over.
It was funny because he talked about the patriotism and the nationalism with it on the podcast on Sunday, and I just started laughing because it was July 4th, the same day you guys recorded.
Right. Yeah, timing was not his best friend then.
Right.
But you know what? I'm rooting to go Denmark tomorrow, I guess, and then I don't even know when the final is, but I'm ready to focus on basketball.
Yeah, the basketball is where my focus is as well. But back to the basketball. And listen, this is not an all Suns love fest here. It's just that I look at the Bucks and I just feel like with Giannis not healthy, because we don't really know. Even if he does play, is he really gonna be 100% tonight? Right. You know what I mean? And I mean, how do you stop the Suns if you're the Bucks? Like, it was really different with the Hawks because Trae Young was the primary perimeter weapon. Now you have two guys with the Suns. So, okay, if you stop or slow down CP3, Devin Booker can still go get 40, 50 points, right? And DeAndre Ayton, he's way better than Clint Capella is as a talent and as an athlete. So, and we know there were times that the Bucks had trouble with Capella in that last series. So, it's not that I don't think the Bucks can win, but I just don't see a path to victory for Milwaukee as currently constituted.
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely comes down to Giannis's health. If he misses a couple games in this series, or he plays, but he looks like Trae Young did in Game 6 of that Hawks-Bucks series, where he's just so clearly physically compromised. I mean, Giannis is a guy who, it's not like he's relying on jump shots as his primary source of offense. Like, he is going to drive to the basket and draw contact and be physical. So if that knee isn't right, that's really going to hamper his style of play. If he comes back and looks like even 80 or 90% of Giannis, I think there is a chance that Milwaukee could win this series. I'm definitely leaning toward the Suns. But in terms of how they defend, my podcast co-host Mort brought this up. If Giannis is healthy, I think at least an interesting curveball to throw would be putting Giannis on CP3, Drew on Devin Booker. I think, you'll assume point guard. So Drew's going to be on Devin Booker. And then PJ Tucker is probably going to get the opening assignment on Devin Booker. But I think Drew is probably best equipped to guard him. And Giannis, just with that length on CP3, we know, he is a maestro of the pick and roll, and he's that mid-range game from the elbow especially. He's just been killing teams throughout the playoffs. But is he going to get that over the 6'11" frame? And I don't even know what Giannis's wingspan is, 7'5", 7'6", the giant outstretched arms of Giannis. Can he get that shot off? I think probably, but is it going to be as efficient as it has been throughout the rest of the playoffs? That I don't know. So I think that's a curveball that they're probably going to throw at some point. But I would guess, knowing Budenholzer, and especially if Giannis is out in Game 1, I would expect Drew on CP3, PJ Tucker on Booker. The Lopez-Ayton matchup is going to be, it won't be as focused on as given the star power in the backcourt for Phoenix in particular, but Ayton has been really good in the playoffs, and he needs to win that matchup against Lopez because, I'm going to guess that the Bucks will stick, at least at first, with their typical drop coverage where they have Lopez close to the basket. But the problem is CP3 and Devin Booker are both very good in the mid-range. So if you chase them over a screen and you're goading them into taking those mid-range shots, they will happily do so. So how Lopez navigates that defensively, if he comes up closer to the screen, all of a sudden Ayton's going to be open. And if they can hit him on lobs or just clean passes close to the basket, if he's able to take advantage of that or get Lopez into foul trouble, that's going to put the Bucks in a world of hurt.
Now, with all that being said, if I can play a little hypothetical with you, if whoever loses this series, what happens to the Bucks or the Suns next? What happens this offseason? Because for these two teams, you could argue this is an opportunity in a lifetime. You don't know if you're ever going to get back here. How many times have we heard fill in the blank team was supposed to be a dynasty, OKC Thunder, and they never were. They never got back. There's no guarantee you're getting back here. So if you lose this NBA Finals, what happens to these two teams in the offseason if one of them loses? Whichever one loses, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, I think both of them, you'll run the cores back. I mean, like Giannis, Drew, Chris are all under contract for the next couple seasons. Brooke Lopez is as well. So, you don't have to worry about any major pieces leaving if you're Milwaukee, but you do have some of those unheralded bench guys, such as Bryn Forbes and Bobby Portis, both of whom are free agents this upcoming offseason. And Bobby Portis in particular, and he didn't play very much in the Brooklyn series, but he was very good against Atlanta. He was good against Miami in that first round. He's probably earned himself, a pretty sizable raise, might have priced himself out of Milwaukee's range. So, for the Bucks, I think it's more just how do you round out the supporting cast around these guys? Phoenix is interesting because a year ago, if you told me that Chris Paul was really considering declining this $44.2 million player option that he has for the 21-22 season, I would have called you absolutely crazy. Now it seems like it's a near certainty. Bleacher Report's Eric Pincus reported, a couple weeks ago, I believe, that, multiple sources said that Paul is likely to turn that down. He's looking for something in the 3-year, $100 million range. As a lot of money to give to a 36-year-old point guard who is no stranger to injuries. But at the same time, I don't know how Phoenix says no to it, given the run they just went on and how important he's been to this team. Ayton has been saying he's the best thing that's ever happened in my career. So I think you just kind of hold your nose and realize there's no guarantee he stays healthy. This might be your best shot that you're going to win. But if you lose Chris Paul, you're not going to be able to replace him with a player anywhere near as impactful. So, I think for both teams, it's just run back the main pieces. And then for Phoenix, much like Milwaukee, a guy like Cameron Payne, also a free agent, also has earned a substantial raise. So are you able to keep him and CP3, or do you have to go, digging around to try to find another backup point guard? But I think both teams should feel pretty good about where they are moving forward. I don't think either team is going to leave this series thinking, oh, we need to blow this thing up completely and start over.
Bryan Toporek joining us here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN, at Beat Toporek on Twitter, the NBA podcast. Check it out. Go subscribe, download, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Bryan, let's flip over to the Sixers. I'm calling these rumors because I don't think almost any of these are legitimate reports. This is mostly just people just kind of putting stuff out into the universe, things that they're hearing. You know what I mean? And it's not. First of all, I'll just preface this: it's not a downgrade against anybody. Some of these people, they're credible people, but I understand that speculation is speculation. So obviously, there's the Kings rumor out there: Simmons to the Kings for De'Aaron Fox and Buddy Hield. There's the Cavs rumor out there: Kevin Love, Colin Sexton, and draft picks. There's the report that the Sixers turned down a trade for Malcolm Brogdon and other players from the Pacers. I've heard that the Warriors have called. I've heard that the Pelicans have called. I've heard that the Timberwolves have called. Whatever's going on, it seems like there is interest in Ben Simmons. So what is your position on where we're at in the rumor mill here?
I'm shocked that a 24-year-old three-time All-Star is having interest in the trade market. Just because he passed up one open dunk, I thought that was it. I thought his career was over after that. No, of course there's interest in this guy. And I think the one consistent theme we've seen, I agree. Like the individual reports, especially at this time of year, if it's not coming from one of the major reporters, you have to take all of this with a grain of salt because this is the time of year that just everyone lies all the time. So I can't speak to the credibility of any of those individual reports. I think it does make sense that a lot of teams are inquiring about him. And just based on some of the, overall scuttlebutt throughout the league, it sounds like there's, his trade value is higher than what people would have believed coming out of that Hawks series. Like, yes, he needs to fix his shooting. That is, no one is arguing against that. But everything else that he brings to the table, his age, having him under contract for 4 more years, especially for a team like Cleveland or like Minnesota that isn't going to get a star free agent to sign with them, this is your best opportunity to get someone of Ben Simmons' caliber. So, what my read on the situation is, he's not untouchable. I don't think anyone would pretend that Daryl Morey is just hanging up the phone every time someone calls about Ben Simmons. He will listen to these offers. But I think especially seeing what's happening in Portland with Damian Lillard, he's the guy who keeps coming up consistently in these rumors that, people are saying that the Sixers at least want to make a run at him if he does become available. I don't think that he does this offseason. So I think the Sixers have to weigh, do we take these offers now, many of which are probably going to be somewhat underwhelming. Like I think no matter what, you're probably going to be giving up the best player in the deal, but maybe you find pieces that fit better, or you can round out your supporting cast a little more. Or do we wait? And do we see if Portland gets off to a rough start next year, or Washington gets off to a rough start next year, Chicago, and then Damian Lillard asks out, or Bradley Beal says, goes to the Wizards and says, I'm not going to re-sign with you in 2022. Or Zach LaVine does the same thing to the Bulls. Because then, Simmons is your last big piece that you can trade, both in terms of his on-court value and then also his contract. It's tough to match salaries and trades. He's got a big one. So if you're acquiring a star, he will be the easiest way to do so. So, I think Morey is going to shop him around and listen to offers, but I am becoming increasingly convinced that Ben Simmons will probably at least start the 21-22 season as a Sixer. Whether he finishes it, I think, will come down to how much he improves this offseason and then what some of the other offers are between now. There's no pressure. If you don't get a good offer now, see what happens the first half of the year. The trade deadline is another opportunity to upgrade. So, there's no sin. Just because he starts the year as a Sixer doesn't mean he's going to end the year as a Sixer.
Well, also, things can change in 2 weeks. The NBA draft is, 2-3 weeks away, right? So,
yeah.
What happens between now and then could change as well. And I've been saying this for a while, Brian. You tell me what you think. When Daryl Morey made the trades that he's made over the years, the Harden trade, the Chris Paul trade, the Paul for Westbrook trade, or any of those other deals, he didn't do it, and it was like everybody knew it was going to happen that way. Like, people had an idea, this might happen, and then we all got blown away by the details. You know what I mean? So there's a part of me that wonders, is this the same situation where we're all being maybe not, and then one day we're going to wake up and just be blown away by some trade because it's just Daryl Morey doing Daryl Morey things.
Yeah, that would not surprise me at all. And I think that's just a theme with most NBA trades. Like, for every Anthony Davis to the Lakers where it's been rumored for, months on end, there are at least 5 where it's like, this just came out of absolutely nowhere. And I think you're right. What we saw, especially during the draft last year, getting off of the Al Horford contract as quickly as he did and bringing back an impact player like Danny Green, no one saw that coming. Same with Josh Richardson for Seth Curry. So, would it surprise me if Morey pulls another rabbit out of his hat and we see a team that no one is talking about as a potential Ben Simmons destination? That's where he ends up being. Totally. It's absolutely within the realm of possibility. Right now is when you're kind of laying the groundwork. Like, this lead up to the draft is when you are calling all 29 other teams, or all 29 other teams are calling you and saying, what would you want for Ben Simmons? And if you can start to find a workable framework, whether it's just the 2 teams or, you can expand it. Like Indiana, let's say, if they wanted, the Sixers want Malcolm Brogdon, but Indiana doesn't want Ben Simmons. Can you find a 3rd team to send Ben Simmons to that has the pieces that Indiana wants? That's what the next 3 weeks are for.
One more before I let you go, Brian. I always appreciate you jumping on the conversation. Bryan Toporek, the co-host of the NBA podcast here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. I have a listener who is very insistent that, listen, I'm not saying this to diminish him, but he's very consistent in this opinion. And I want you to explain what you said earlier. You said that Ben Simmons is, he's a tradable asset because of a variety of things. This listener believes, and I've heard other people say this too, that no, you don't trade Ben Simmons, you trade Tobias Harris. That Tobias Harris is the guy you have to trade. You don't trade Ben Simmons. Do you agree with that? Do you disagree with that? Is Tobias Harris even a tradable player?
I think especially after this year, he is tradable. He showed up on like every person's worst contracts of the NBA last year. And he has a career best season, was right on the brink of being an all-star. So, and has one fewer year left on his deal. So is he tradable? Yes. Are you going to get a ton of value for him? That's the part that I'm not sure. And I would say, given, he struggled in those final few games of the Hawks series, but he was really good and consistent throughout the entire regular season and for most of the playoffs. Like, if you're looking toward what's going to help the Sixers get closer to championship contention, is it trading Tobias Harris and still having, if Ben Simmons doesn't improve at all offensively, we're still going to have the same problems that we've seen over the last few years? Or do you trade Ben Simmons, keep Tobias, who was productive, again, for most of the playoffs? Maybe you can get a guy in here who pushes him down the offensive totem pole a little bit, so he's more of a number 3 option than a number 2. And then I think he'll be even more productive. So I wouldn't be opposed to trading Tobias Harris, but I don't think Ben Simmons is untouchable by any means this offseason. I think if you're looking at, it ultimately comes down to what you can get for both guys. Like, if you can't get a point guard in a Ben Simmons trade, then I agree. It would be hard to move him because there aren't going to be many other avenues for the Sixers to get that type of player. But I also wouldn't say we have to move Tobias Harris because Ben Simmons has all this upside, because he does in the regular season. We've seen he's a great regular season player, but we also know this is now the 3rd straight playoff series for him, or playoff run for him, I should say, in which his limitations were a major contributing factor to, I would argue, an earlier than expected exit for the Sixers.
He's Bryan Toporek, co-host of the NBA podcast. He writes for Forbes Sports about the NBA. Also check him out on Twitter at @BToporek. And he joined us here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Bryan, great stuff today. I always appreciate you jumping on the conversation.
Of course, Josh. Always happy to come on. Thanks for having me.